on my mind, and I still have dreams. Yes, I should hope so. The connection still remains strong, and the dreams very real.
And for some reason, I'm reminded of Labyrinth, which said it perfectly in like what, less than 20 seconds. At the end of the movie, when Sarah is done with her adventure in the labyrinth with the Goblin King and all of that, uh, I'm forgetting character names now, but he appears to her in her mirror, and they say prominently before she has to go face the Goblin King by herself, if you need us, you will call us. And she's like, yes, if I need you, I will call. And so then, she gets everything. She goes back to the real world, and you're left.
Spoilers, by the way, for a
Well,
film.
don't worry, I'll put a giant spoiler thing.
No, I was just going to say, for a film that's like 30 years old, so if you
Yeah,
haven't seen it
is a
before
good
now,
movie.
maybe you should see it. I don't know.
In my opinion, it is a good movie, and I think you should watch it if you
It's
like.
a great movie.
If
I
you
love it.
if you like fantasy and Jim Henson. But anyway,
And David Bowie's gigantic dick.
yes, giant, giant.
One of my friends proposed that its name was actually Magic, and the song Magic Dance was actually about it. And it gives you a whole new light on that whole song.
But anyway, and because the whole story is about her putting away childish things and becoming an adult, being more responsible and the like. And that she was trying to live her life, in a childish fantasy world. And I always thought it was a very good ending, when she looks in the mirror and then she sees like her companions, like, you'll call if you ever need us.
Yeah,
And
should you need us.
yeah, and she's like, I do need you. And they're like, you do? She's like, sometimes I still need you. And he's like, okay. And so then, like, everybody's in a room hanging out. And I always
Yeah.
thought that was cool. And I'm
I
like, that's how fantasy is. Eventually, you grow up and, you have to leave that behind, but sometimes you still need that childishness, that
yeah,
fantasy to brighten
and
your
I think
life.
I think honestly, some people more than others, because some people can have that fantasy and be perfectly mature. I think the idea of maturity has become so problematic because a lot of people, like this person writing this story, don't really understand what maturity means. And as a result, a lot of people are only superficially mature, and they don't really understand what it means to be actually mature. So, I mean, sometimes you do need fantasy. Sometimes you do need to dream and to invent a
Hmm.
fantasy world with fantasy people that may not exist in this physical reality, maybe not in this world, but that's not to say they're not real. And I loved how Labyrinth handled that because they were still there. She didn't. I always hate stories. One of my pet peeves is the stories where they end with the magic going away, or whatever,
Yeah.
and it's like that's not realistic. I'm not even sorry for saying it. It's not realistic. People would have terrible, terrible repercussions, terrible psychological repercussions if, they're going through this magical fantasy and all this stuff, and then suddenly it's gone. Like nobody's going to just readjust to their non-magical life after that. It's going to come with a lot of issues. And if you're going to say, oh well, this is going into the adult world, we're going to have a lot of issues, and they never seem to acknowledge that. It never seems to get addressed. But I really liked how they did that in Labyrinth, and I also like the fact that like her father and stepmother, they were kind of assholes,
Yeah. Mostly they
but
were focusing on the stepmother, but
yeah, and I mean, she wasn't so much like a wicked stepmother of the story, but
yeah.
she was kind of a bitch, and I hate to say that, but she was. Her parents, her father and stepmother, were very selfish, and it was very apparent, even though they felt that they were, mature adults and not being unreasonable at all, asking her to do this. They really had not thought about her feelings, and as a result, she
I
fixated.
also, well, I'm also going to have to counterpoint that because I don't think she really opened up about her feelings. It was just more of when she encountered the problem, she, instead of, you know, she just resort to childish anger rather than being like, look, I kind of want to do my own thing sometimes
Well,
instead
yeah,
of always babysitting the kid.
yeah, well, I mean, she lashed out at them because she didn't say, you know, I have this I want to do, but they presumed that, you know, she would have told them, even though they obviously didn't ask. And in fact, she said at one point, she implied that they really hadn't made a very good gesture in good faith to approach her about this. So she sort of started to fixate on her mother as a kind of, almost a kind of escape. That's why she loved all the drama, all the makeup and the costumes and things like that. She was fixated on the idea of her mother, I think, which her mother had left them, I don't know, to do, I guess, to go on stage and pursue a career or whatever. But she had also been obviously not very kind to Sarah either, because, well, she left her there and she obviously wasn't letting her live with her or anything like that. So,
Yeah, that's not what I got out of the opening to it at all. I'm
well,
like, I like
see,
had like I never questioned where the her real mother went off to or anything. I just assumed, stuff happens. You get divorces or whatever, or people die, and then the widow finds somebody else, and
yeah, I
sometimes
mean, I really don't know, and I think it
you're breaking
unsaid.
up very badly.
Oh, sorry. I think it was good that they left it mostly kind of up to the viewer to decide, what they believed as what had happened, because if you start to say what happened to the mother, whether she's still alive or not, or whether she's gone off to do her own thing, or what happened. But I always got the impression that Sarah kind of fixated on her mother in an unhealthy way that was more like the idea of her mother rather than the reality of it. And she used that to get away from the reality where she was, and was very unhappy with Toby, who may not have been her. Was he her stepbrother?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say
No, wait.
I was pretty sure that was
No,
her
I think that
stepbrother,
was her half brother. I
half
don't think
brother.
that was
Yeah,
her step.
stepbrother or half brother, one or the other.
It doesn't really matter. It's her brother.
Yeah, I mean it's a brother, but still it's not her brother from her mother and father.
Yeah.
So I mean that's still kind of, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of jealousy there too. A lot of things. I mean, being a teenager, there's a lot of other things going on.
Yeah, I mean she's got a lot going on, and clearly she's dissatisfied whether or not her father and stepmother have really taken the time to talk to her, and it doesn't seem like they have, because her stepmother basically just lectures her and then, tries to say something that is immediately refuted by Sarah as being completely untrue, because they say, "Oh, your father and I very rarely go out.
Yeah,
We
and
go
she's
out
like
every
every
week."
weekend, and I'm
Yeah,
like, well, that might be. Granted, it might be to her, only once a week. That's not very often. Some people have a different concept of what is excessive and not, but.
that's true.
I
But
mean, granted, she was kind of an a-hole, but at the same time, I think Sarah was also being a little, I'm not sure what the word is.
well, she was being kind of a diva. She
And,
she had
which to me was what the movie was about, was her putting away childish things, but understanding childish things also had their place.
well, I think to me it was more that she was learning that, yeah, that the way of looking at things, the way she was looking at things had to change, and
Yeah,
whatever you label it, a lot of her worldview centered around herself.
yes.
And
As they would, being a teenager.
yeah, and I mean,
Or a
it is,
child, even.
and she was being asked to do a lot of things that were not really fair to her. And in fact, they have an exchange. She and Jared have an exchange. You keep saying that. I wonder what your basis for comparison is. And it's very true. It's not fair. It's not fair at all.
Yeah.
and she keeps going up against these things that just absolutely are completely and utterly unfair. But eventually she just sort of calms down, and she works with people, and her heart opens up, and she gets to see that a lot of the things that she's carried on with her are essentially non-essential. That the things that she really needs are inside of her,
Mhm.
and the precious friends that she has, and all this other stuff. And I don't agree with everything that the film said in every way, but I think overall it was a very good way of showing someone coming to terms with a lot of things that are very difficult to come to terms with. And it didn't condescend, and it didn't serve it up in too convenient, too pat, whatever. But I think it was very good dealing with that, because she was very selfish at the beginning, but her father and stepmother were also pretty selfish from what we could see of them. Her father expressed a token interest, when she pitched a fit, but at the same time, maybe that was the only way to get his attention, because he obviously hadn't taken much effort to figure out, how the divorce or her mother's death or whatever happened to her mother not being there, affected her.
Again, I don't think it really had anything to do with her mother or anything like that. It just seemed more to me like he just didn't really know what to do. So,
Well, no, I mean, she had her mother's picture on her vanity mirror, and she was very she had the clippings from her mother's appearances.
maybe I should rewatch that movie again because it has been a while, like a
I
few
mean,
years since I watched it.
it didn't go in, like I said, it didn't go into any detail about where her mother is or what happened to her or why she's not there. But it was very obvious that she had kind of a fixation on her mother, and her father was just not living up to her expectations, whether it was a fair and objective kind of judgment, which it probably wasn't. I don't think anything's really objective. But I mean, she even had a point, like he knocks on her door and like expresses concern, and then he leaves anyway in like 30 seconds.
Yeah,
You
but
know,
didn't she actually tell him that she wasn't interested in talking or something like that? And so he's like, "Well, okay, we'll be back later."
I think something like that. But he
And I'm
just
like, "Well,
pretty
what
much,
should he have done? Should he have actually insisted on just barging in and making her
well,
talk
no.
when she
But I
told him
mean,
no?"
if he was really that interested in talking, but that he wasn't really all that interested in talking, and obviously from their interactions, they hadn't done much talking. So I mean, maybe after the film, they were able to talk, because she wasn't, because really, even if we say, she was childish and reactionary, she was really basically just reacting to a bad situation that was given to her. I mean, she wasn't completely guilty. Her stepmother laid in on her from the moment that she got in, even though she just let time run away with her, which it could happen to anyone, and get soaked in a random rain shower, you know, basically tells the dog he can't come in, tells, lectures Sarah, even though she knows she's late, and she's sorry for being late, and she's not very late, but she's soaked to the skin, and woman doesn't show any concern over her. So that's why it's such a good film. Because it doesn't spoon feed you. It's got a lot of different interpretations of the situations and circumstances. So I think that's what makes it good anyway. I mean, we can talk about this, and we could probably take a whole episode and talk about Labyrinth and what we got out of it.